There is a simple rule in history. When the price of gold doubles, empires collapse. This is not just a coincidence. It is almost like a mathematical law. Most people only look at the chaos that comes after a collapse. They see inflation, riots, war, hunger, and broken politics. But they miss the real story. Every collapse triggers a huge transfer of wealth. In fact, it becomes the biggest transfer of wealth in human history, and that process has already started today. The fall of an empire often creates more new millionaires than its rise, but only for the people who understand the blueprint. Inside this blueprint, there is a hidden mechanism. It decides who loses everything and who builds generational wealth. This mechanism was designed by the powerful. It was designed for the powerful, and it runs on one simple fuel: the destruction of your money. They tell you money is complicated. They say it depends on economic formulas, interest rates, and central banks, but that is mostly a lie. The truth is much simpler and much more brutal. When a government runs out of money, it does not stop spending. It simply creates more money out of thin air. When they create more money, your savings lose value. This is an invisible form of theft. This has been the fatal flaw of every empire in history. And the best way to see this theft is by watching gold. Gold is the constant in the story. Gold itself does not change. What changes is the currency used to measure it. The currency collapses, and gold exposes that collapse. To understand what is coming next, you must understand the blueprint. You have to see that this is not a theory. It is a script that has played out again and again. So let's travel back in time and watch the pattern unfold. We start with Rome, we move through Spain, then we visit the Ming Dynasty in China, then the British Empire, and finally, we arrive at the United States today. You will see that the countdown has already begun. Our first stop is Rome. The backbone of Roman money was not gold, but silver. The main coin was called the denarius. It was introduced around 211 BC. For a long time, it was trusted across the known world. At its peak, it was about 95% pure silver. You could hold it in your hand and know its value. For nearly 300 years, Rome kept the coin mostly stable. The empire grew, trade expanded, and life improved. But governments always face temptation. The temptation to spend more than they have. The temptation to promise more than they can deliver. The temptation to cheat. Rome was no different. The cheating began slowly. Under Emperor Nero, the silver purity fell to about 90%. Under Trajan, it dropped to around 85%. Under Commodus, it moved closer to 70%. By the time of the Severan dynasty, the denarius was only about 50% silver. That meant the government was minting twice as many coins from the same silver. They were quietly stealing half the value from the people. This was an invisible tax. Then came the breaking point, the crisis of the 3rd century. Emperors were desperate. They needed to pay soldiers and fund wars. They dropped all pretense of honesty. By around 250 AD, the denarius had less than 5% silver. It was basically a copper coin with a thin silver wash. The wash even rubbed off in people's hands. The people understood. The soldiers understood. They refused fake money. Soldiers demanded payment in gold instead. Historians estimate that prices rose more than 1,000% in a few decades. A single gold coin called the aureus once equaled 25 denarii. Later, that same gold coin was worth thousands of denarii. By the end, it was worth millions of denarii. Gold did not really go up. The denarius collapsed. This was the market's final vote of no confidence. And right on schedule, the empire followed the money. Political chaos exploded. Between 235 and 285 AD, Rome had around 26 emperors. Almost all of them were murdered. The empire split into pieces. Trade broke down. Taxes went up just to pay for worthless money. In many areas, people stopped using coins. They went back to barter, trading wheat for shoes and goods for goods. The lesson is permanent. When the currency collapses against gold, the empire collapses with it. Rome wrote the first chapter of the blueprint. But it was not the last. Next, we move forward to Spain in the 1500s. Spain was the superpower of its time. It had colonies all over the world. Most importantly, it had something no one else had: massive silver and gold supplies. Silver from Potosi in modern-day Bolivia. Gold from Mexico and the Americas. Spanish treasure fleets carried huge amounts of bullion across the Atlantic. At its peak, Spain imported over 200 tons of silver per year. Spain believed it had found the ultimate shortcut. It did not need to work and produce. It could just buy what it wanted with silver. But when you increase money without increasing real production, prices explode. This was called the price revolution. Between 1500 and 1600, prices in Spain roughly quadrupled. Food, wool, rent, everything became more expensive. For the average family, life became extremely hard. Yet even with all this silver, the Spanish government still spent too much. King Philip II borrowed heavily to fight wars. He used future silver shipments as collateral, but it was never enough. Spain defaulted again and again in 1557, 1575, 1596, and 1607. The richest empire in the world was drowning in debt. So what did they do next? The same thing Rome did. They debased the money. Spain issued cheap copper coins called vellon. They told people these coins were worth the same as silver, but the market knew better. Gold and silver rose sharply against the new currency. The elites and landowners protected themselves by holding real metal. The poor and the wage earners held the worthless coins. Their savings were destroyed. Prices soared while their money died. And once again, the rule held. As gold and silver doubled in value against the currency, the empire collapsed. Spain lost its dominance. New powers like the Dutch and the British took over global leadership. Spain was left hollow. It had held the world's treasure and still went bankrupt. Once again, gold doubling was not a sign of strength. It was a warning that the empire was finished. Now we move to the east, to the Ming Dynasty in China. In the 14th century, China was the most advanced economy in the world. The Ming did something the West would not try for centuries. They tried to replace metal with paper money. In 1375, they created a large Fiat paper currency. It was called the Great Ming Treasure Note. On paper, the idea looked clever. It gave the government more control. It allowed them to fund projects more easily. But they made the same mistake. They printed more and more of this paper money. The notes were not backed by silver or gold. Their value depended only on government trust. Over time, that trust disappeared. The paper lost over 99% of its value. Hyperinflation destroyed it. People refused to accept the government notes. They turned back to silver as real money. The economy restructured itself around silver. By the 1560s, even the government demanded taxes in silver. For a while, this worked. Silver flowed in from Japan and from Spanish colonies. But in the early 1600s, those silver flows stopped. Japan closed its borders. Spain declined and reduced its exports. Suddenly, China had a silver shortage. Silver became extremely expensive. Its value against copper coins tripled and then quadrupled. Peasants were paid in copper but had to pay taxes in silver. This was impossible. They were crushed by the gap. Famine, poverty, and heavy taxes led to rebellion. A huge peasant revolt led by Li Zikang toppled the Ming Dynasty in 1644. Again, the pattern held. When the hard asset silver, in this case, soared against the everyday currency, the system broke. The empire fell. Now we move to the British Empire in the 1900s. Britain was once the global superpower. Its currency, the pound sterling, was the world's reserve money. It was backed by gold. London was the financial center of the world. But war and debt slowly weakened Britain. World War I forced them off the gold standard temporarily. They printed money to pay for the war. They tried to return to gold in the 1920s, but trust was damaged. Then came World War II. Britain won the war but lost its financial strength. It had to rely on loans from the United States. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, a new system was created. This time, the dollar, not the pound, became the anchor. The pound's value was fixed, but too high. Britain pretended its currency was stronger than reality. In 1949, the truth came out. In a single weekend, Britain devalued the pound by over 30%. The pound fell from $4.03 to $2.80. Because the dollar was tied to gold, gold suddenly became far more expensive in pounds. This was not just a financial adjustment. It was the end of Britain's reign as financial leader. The empire's money had stepped down. The blueprint passed to America. Now we arrive at the United States. After World War II, the U.S. dollar became the new global reserve currency. At Bretton Woods, the U.S. promised the world something powerful. 1 ounce of gold would always be equal to $35. Other countries trusted this promise. The dollar was treated as good as gold. But over time, the U.S. also fell into the same temptation. It spent beyond its means. The Vietnam War, big social programs, and constant expansion cost huge amounts. The U.S. printed more dollars than it had gold. Other nations began to notice. They saw the U.S. was cheating. Countries like France started returning their dollars. They asked for gold instead. Gold reserves in the U.S. started to fall. The system was under stress. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made a historic move. He ended the ability of other countries to convert dollars into gold. This closed the gold window. The dollar was no longer backed by gold. This changed everything. From that moment, all major currencies became pure fiat. They were backed only by government promises, not by metal. Once gold was set free, its price began to rise fast. It doubled, and then doubled again. By 1980, gold had gone from $35 to over $800 an ounce. The signal was clear. Just like Rome, Spain, Ming China, and Britain, the U.S. currency had broken its old rule. The countdown had begun. Since then, the world has been living in a pure fiat system. Every currency on earth now depends only on faith. Faith in governments, faith in central banks, but faith is fragile. After the 2008 crisis, after decades of war, and after the huge money printing of the 2020s, that faith is weakening. U.S. national debt has exploded. The system is starting to rot, just like Rome's. So people are searching for an escape. They feel their money is being debased. And at this exact moment, a new solution appears. Digital gold, Bitcoin. It is sold as the perfect escape. A decentralized, anonymous, peer-to-peer money. Supposedly outside government control. But think deeper. Who controls the internet? Who controls the power grid? Who controls the exchanges where Bitcoin is traded? Governments and large institutions do. They do not need to hack Bitcoin to kill it. They can shut down exchanges. They can ban transactions. They can make it illegal to use. They can tax it heavily. They can cut off the banking system and on-ramps. They can pull the plug. Bitcoin depends on systems they already control. It is not real escape if they can turn it off. In this way, it can become a trap. A digital net for people who see the problem, but not the real solution. So what is the real escape? What is the blueprint used by truly wealthy families and institutions? It is the same as always. Real, physical assets. Gold, silver, productive land. Rare resources. Things you can touch. Things you can hold. Look at what central banks are doing today. They are buying gold in record amounts. They are bringing gold back from foreign vaults to their own countries. They are not buying digital coins. They are buying metal, heavy, yellow, physical metal. Their actions speak louder than their words. They tell the public one story. But they do the opposite for themselves. That is the only signal you need. When Rome's denarius died, the rich held gold and land. When France's paper money collapsed, those with hidden gold survived. When the British pound was devalued, those holding gold were protected. The pattern is clear. Gold is defense. It is insurance against collapse. It does not make you rich overnight. It protects you from being made poor. Silver is the money of the people. It is practical, divisible, and has been used for everyday trade for thousands of years. Real assets like farmland and critical resources hold value through crisis. You can stand on land. You can hold metal. You cannot truly hold a digital code. The coming wealth transfer is not about finding the next hot token. It is about protecting what you already have. It is about moving out of paper promises and digital illusions and moving into real, tangible value. If you cannot hold it in your hand, you do not fully own it. That is the basic rule of survival. The blueprint is clear. The signal has already appeared. Gold has doubled. The empire's money is breaking. So the final question is this. During the greatest wealth transfer in history, will you be among those who protect and grow their wealth? Or will you stand like the Roman citizens once did, holding worthless coins while the empire falls around you?